Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today on Perspectives. Earlier this week, a special 9/11 remembrance ceremony was held at the Mobile Memorial Gardens. The ceremony also honored first responders locally. Now, as we remember that day, September 11, 2001, hundreds of police officers and firefighters, they rushed to the scene of the attacks. More than 400 died performing heroic acts and rescues. The four coordinated attacks were the deadliest terrorist attacks on American soil in U.S. history. Nearly 3,000 people died. Some 2,750 people were killed in New York alone, 184 at the Pentagon in Washington, and 40 in Pennsylvania. Many of us remember where we were that morning and how we learned of the attacks, but unbelievably, it happened 23 years ago. And some of the survivors are concerned today that some of us may have forgotten, or that day has become just another page in American history that can easily be turned. Our guest today on Perspectives, retired Chaplain Ron Pierce. He's a 25-year employee of the state of Alabama's merit system, serving as a tragedy chaplain with the Mobile County Sheriff's Office and the Mobile Division of the FBI. Well, after a quick break this morning, we'll be talking with Chaplain Pierce, who 23 years ago spent several weeks at Ground Zero in New York at the site of the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center. His assignment to provide critical incident stress management, diffusing and debriefing. Now, what that means and how it helps, we'll hear it all about it coming up on Perspectives as it continues in just a moment. Today on Perspectives, we are remembering 9/11. Our very special guest, retired Chaplain Ron Pierce. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. You know, we've had some just tremendous conversations here the last few days as I have been informed about the different aspects of all of this for you, and it's just a phenomenal story. Tell me first, how did you hear about this? Because your story is a little different than maybe for mine, where I was listening to the radio that morning and heard of the plane, the first plane, hitting a twin tower. How did you hear about what had happened in New York?
Well, I was at another 911, okay? It was a young couple who had just had a baby recently, and the baby died of SIDS death. They woke up on 9/11 to find the baby dead. And I was there working. Of course, we didn't have on any televisions, we didn't have on any radios, and I had gotten a call, and I realized that it was from Washington, but I didn't fool with it because I was just about to talk to the family and prepare them for what the detectives were going to have to do and talk to them about. And so when the detective started, I stepped back outside and called. And that's when I said to they answered, and I said, "This is Chaplain Pierce. You're trying to get in touch with me?" And they said, "Yes, how soon can you be ready to come?" I said, "Come to what?" And the lady said, "What planet are you on, Chaplain Pierce?" And I said, what do you mean? She said, "You haven't seen or heard about the towers being hit?" I said, "No, ma'am, I'm inside a home where this family has lost their baby, and we haven't had any news on it all." And so, and I said, "I haven't answered my phone." And she said, "Well, as soon as you can get ready, we'd like to get you here because you're trained in critical incident stress management debriefing, and we're going to need you up here." And so the FBI were making plans. Well, finally they decided to take the ones they already had on the ground and leave them there for a couple of weeks. And then we were the second team on the ground at Ground Zero.
And to get there wasn't a simple thing either, was it?
No, at first, that's one of the reasons why they decided to go ahead and keep what they had, was because there were no planes flying. Now, they were trying to work on getting us flown up by military aircraft, but then it just all, they decided to wait.
I guess.
And because they said that the planes would probably be starting to fly in a week or so. And actually it was only, I believe, about 3 to 4 days, if I remember correctly.
Right.
So, and that's when we went up there and landed on the ground. It was still smoking. It was still, and I had just been in the towers a couple of months.
My goodness.
Before they were, and it was just amazing.
So with you not having seen the television news and the things that we saw of the first hours of this happening in New York, what was your first impression when you got there and saw actually ground zero and what had happened?
Well, I had seen some things happening, but you're not prepared
Sure.
for what that kind of destruction, especially when you've been there and saw how huge they were. And as a matter of fact, some of the people who would come up to me, because I would be wearing the FBI raid jacket, the blue jacket says FBI, and on the back it said Chaplain in big letters.
Yes.
And so there would be people coming up to me and say, what are we going to do? But that was our landmark. If we were somewhere in town, we'd look up to see what direction to go in.
So the North Star, so to speak. My goodness. Before we go into what type of training that you have that they wanted and needed on scene there, share with us briefly what led you into becoming a chaplain and wanting to help others, because you had some personal tragedy in your own life.
Yes, when they called me and asked me, at that time I was chaplain for the state of Alabama's mental health and mental retardation department. They had 2 chaplains, one in the lower part of the state, one in the upper part of the state. And my office at that time was at Searcy Hospital, and I covered the other hospitals in this area below Montgomery. And so my wife and I he was about to turn 70. We were about to celebrate Happy's 17th birthday when he was killed in an automobile accident. And he lived for 9 days before he died. But then when they called me and asked me would I accept that position as chaplain for law enforcement, I told them, I turned them down to start with, because I didn't know, I thought it was prison chaplain.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, my patients are already confined here by law. So why would I want to go to from one confinement ministry to another?
Right.
And then the man called me back in 2 weeks, and I'm glad he did. And that he asked me if I would reconsider, because he couldn't get me off his mind. And I said, well, look, I'm already in a confinement ministry. He said, no. This will be a tragedy chaplain. You will work with the deputies and their families, but you will be called to every homicide, suicide, death by fire, death by drowning, any tragedy, to work with the families through that. And at that point, I just literally started crying. And my wife came in there to see what was wrong. And I said, they just called me again from law enforcement about that. And she said, I thought you turned them down. I said, I did, but the first thing out of his mouth was, you'll be a tragedy chaplain and you'll be called to the, and then he said, you will help the families get through the loss of their sons and daughters. And I said, if I can help anybody get through what we went through, that's where I'm supposed to be, because I don't think God carries you through anything he don't want to use you for. And we've been through that fire. It's time for us to help somebody go through it.
You had handled that heartache. So the title is Critical Incident Stress Management, Diffusing and Debriefing.
Right.
And how was that needed there in New York?
Well, any critical incident can cause certain people, not everybody, to have, develop into PTSD. All right. And one of the things that if anything affects you so emotionally that it begins to affect your job and your family life, your private life, then you need to try to get help for that. Well, we were trained, and on one of the critical incident stress management debriefings, one of the giants was Mitchell, and we were trained on the Mitchell training. But also, there was a former FBI profiler by the name of Jim Horn, who got interested in stress, and he wanted all the chaplains to be trained in that, and they sent me to Philadelphia to go through the course, and I did. And of course they used all of us at Ground Zero to work with the people and to go through that. Now I happened to bring, the only thing I did bring was just a statement about it, and what it does is it shows you the symptoms physically, cognitively, emotionally, behaviorally, and spiritually, you know. And of course not everybody is going to have all these, but you can help them recognize if they are going through that, you know, that they will be able to get help, and that if they talk it through, that then a lot of times that helps them. And so that's why they wanted the critical incident stress management debriefings. One of the funny things was, you usually have a critical incident stress management, you have 12 to 15 people. Chaplain Brown and I did them over in Baldwin County and Mobile County.
Chaplain Jerry Brown, who wanted to be with us too.
That's right, that's right. The one that had the knee replacement, not able to be here this morning. But whenever we would go to speak to the people, we would have 12 to 15 people. And that's a good group to tell what they're going through. And some of them may not want to talk, but they can hear and know that, well, I'm going through what he's going through. I'm going through what she's going through. And so they begin to realize they're normal, that they're not going crazy because they can't sleep and because they keep seeing stuff. They're not going crazy. They are normal, and they get to see that as it goes around. Now at Ground Zero.
Hold that point there, and we're going to take a quick break, and we come back, we'll take it from that point there about Ground Zero. We thank you so much for being here this morning. We're sharing and hearing this morning from Chaplain Ron Pierce, retired chaplain now, spent 25 years in the service, and he was there at Ground Zero. More on Perspectives in just a moment. Welcome back. We're talking to retired Chaplain Ron Pierce about 9/11, the observance, as well as memorializing that date in our history. And Chaplain Pierce, you got us to the point of where you've informed us of what you had as a ability to help in that situation. So now we're at Ground Zero, and what did you see in your first interactions with people there? Well,
of course, the people who were in the buildings close to them were in fear of more planes coming.
Yes.
More planes hitting buildings.
So it was unknown to all of us. Yeah.
Right, and so they were thinking that, you know, this could be coming. So there was a lot of fear there, and any kind of loud noise. For instance, you can imagine what happened in one of the pictures I gave you. It's Building 7 falling, the last one that fell, you know, several days after, so actually several weeks after.
And how many stories was that one? That was only...
I can't remember how many stories that was.
Not as tall as the towers.
When it fell, I mean, everybody thought, oh, you know, somebody's done something, somebody blew it up, somebody did something, they're on the ground now, you know, that kind of thing. And so you had fear and stress everywhere. But as I told you a moment ago, one of the things that Ground Zero did, there were so many people that we were used to 10 or 12, remember I told you, in a circle?
Right.
They sent me over to Queens, which Queens had right across the Hudson, you know, they could look out the windows and see the planes hitting, and they were the FBI building also in Queens. And they were called they were one of the ones that are what they call rural, okay? I mean, Queens isn't rural.
Right.
But
compared to
I
Manhattan,
walked into the room, and there was a circle, all right, between 150 and 200 people.
My goodness.
I said, we're going to be here for a while.
Right.
But on the ground, what we did was go around to, as we went around the 16 acres, okay, we would go and see a fireman sitting somewhere outside the pile, and he would be soaking wet, and we would ask him if, just ask him, do you want to get some new shoes and some clothes that are dry? Because there was clothes coming in here, and I'm talking about their uniform and boots that they needed. And so we'd go get them and bring it back to them. And then if they wanted to talk, they'd talk to us. If they didn't want to talk, we wouldn't bother them. But the thing that I told you about one finger, and
yes, share that.
Where they found one finger out at Staten Island, okay, which I told you had a different name at first, but then they changed that because of the way it sounded with the bodies being found. But they found one finger in the pile, and when they found that finger, they stopped everything. They covered it with an American flag. They put it over on a gurney. They stopped, called the chaplain over to have a prayer, and then they took it to have it checked for DNA so that they could find out who that individual was that was in the pile. It was so respectful. If they found somebody in the pile, anything, everything would stop. Machines, everything. It would get eerie quiet, and they'd bring that body out, and it was overwhelming.
Yes. And you were there for 6 months overall?
Yeah, I went there for the first 2 weeks, came back, and then Jim Horn wanted me to be part of the critical incident stress management debriefing because at that time he was still connected to the FBI in some way, I can't remember, but I know that he was also the president of the International Stress Association, and he wanted me to come back and do critical incident stress management debriefings there, and so I went back up there.
Is there a certain thing that you remember that you want to share about an individual who you interacted with and you were able to help them?
I think that having one guy who said, they tried to get him to go home and get rest. Well, they'd just go off to the supervisor left and go right back into the pile. Mm-hmm. And he was sitting there and he was so tired. And he said, my best friend's in there. I'm not leaving till I find him. And I said, son, you're going to have to get some rest. And he said, Chaplain, what kind of God would allow this to happen? And I said, son, there's been evil in this world from the beginning. It'll be here till the end. And sometimes it wins a battle. But just remember, it will not win the war.
Amen.
And there were other instances. The family had a little place where they met, where it had all the names and everything there. And the families would come over and they'd ask you to pray for them. They'd ask you to pray for them. I can even remember, and I made a joke about it because I try to bring some humor into some. And one of the people in the Justice Department said, we need you to come and pray. I said, excuse me, this is the Justice Department, right? You want me to come do what? And they said, oh, come on, Chaplain.
Okay.
Come on, help us out, okay?
But you brought some lightening of the situation to that. So, as you share these things, it's obvious to many who are watching today, but share why you feel it's important for us to participate like you were this past week involved with the local memorial celebration that happened, I shouldn't say celebration, but memorial ceremony that happened at the Mobile Memorial Gardens.
Yes.
Why is it important for us to make sure we do this every year?
Well, I like, as I told you this morning, I really like the way they do it, bringing Griggs School over to do the Pledge of Allegiance and stuff like that so that the younger kids can see what they don't even know.
Right.
Okay? Now, we should remember it and pass it on to the ones behind us to let them know you know, how important it is to always know that we can at any time be attacked, and we must be ready for that when it takes place. We must, you know, I know a lot of people don't like to have a big military or something like that, but the stronger you are in peacetime, the more peace you'll
That's
have.
right. That's so
and
true.
and then for all the other kids that, like I told you, Blue Mass, they bring all the 5th graders to the cathedral.
The
And-
Archdiocese.
Yes,
Catholic
the
schools.
Archdiocese does that, and lets those kids be there with the law enforcement, with the firemen, with the EMTs. And so I think we need to remember, because we get too comfortable sometimes and too satisfied with where we are, and forget that we need these people as well as the military to protect us.
right.
So that even if something does like this happen again, then we'll have some peace. It didn't happen right after 9/11, did it?
Right, no.
We've had peace since then, right? Here, well, now we had to go
Right.
and fight for the terrorists,
Yeah.
but here in this country,
Yes.
you know, except for what we call local terrorism.
That's it. That's it. Chaplain Pierce, we thank you for coming and sharing today, and hopefully everyone who's watched have gotten a hold of that thought and understanding, because it's so important, especially today when we need more people to be participating in our military, where we're running some shortages there. We thank you again for your service in time of 25 years, and you're still bringing the word on Sundays at churches that are in need, as well as filling in for the chaplaincy as well. So we thank you for joining us this morning.
I didn't find anywhere in my Bible where it says ministers retire.
Right, all right. Well, we thank you so much, and we thank him for joining us. And of course, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Hopefully you have some information to carry us on. Have a great week.